It was a typical day at Nevermore Academy, the kind where the sky looked like it had decided to keep its thoughts to itself. Wednesday Addams sat in the library, writing in her journal as the shadows cast long across the shelves. The rhythmic scratch of her pen against the paper filled the silence, interrupted only by the occasional flicker of candlelight. Yet, despite the stillness, there was something tugging at her mind. Wan, her girlfriend, had been noticeably absent from classes for the past few days. Wednesday had always known Wan was a contrast to her in almost every way. Sweet, soft-spoken, and full of warmth. Wednesday couldn't understand, but admired nonetheless. Wan was her polar opposite, with her delicate sensibilities and bright, almost ethereal personality. And that's why Wednesday had grown so fond of her. The difference between their personalities intrigued her. But absence, especially from something as routine as classes, wasn't something Wednesday could simply ignore. So when the bell rang, signaling the end of the day, she made her way to Ryan's dorm without hesitation, her mind racing a quiet concern. She knocked once, twice, and then just entered the room, finding Ryan curled up on her bed wrapped in a plush blanket. The soft scent of lavender hung in the air, a stark contrast from the heavy scent of incense that usually clung to Wednesday's own dorm. Ryan? Wednesday's voice was unusually gentle, a slight edge of concern sneaking their way through. Ryan's soft, hesitant gaze met hers. She quickly pulled the blanket tighter around herself, as though to shield herself from the outside world. "Hey, Wednesday," Ryan murmured. Her voice was hoarse, not so much from speaking. She managed a small apologetic smile, but there was something very wrong. "Why haven't you been to class?" Wednesday's tone was direct, but there was a hidden undertone of care that she couldn't hide, no matter how much she truly did try to suppress it. She didn't show emotion easily, but when she could, it was kinda easy to tell. But something was off with YN. YN hesitated, biting her lip. I'm on my period. I don't really feel well enough to go to class." Wednesday's dark eyes softened as she processed the information. Of course, she knew about periods in the general sense. Well, she obviously had to deal with the nuisance of it herself. She wasn't entirely sure what Ryan needed or wanted right now, but she did know that Ryan's comfort was important to her. "Do you need anything?" Wednesday asked, her usual stoic demeanor faltering for a moment. Ryan managed another weak smile, grateful for the effort. "I'm fine, really, just really, really tired." Wednesday hesitated again, trying to push past her usual emotional distance. She went to Ryan's side, carefully sitting on the edge of the bed. She looked at the blankets, then at Ryan's face, trying to find some sort of clue as to what would make her feel better right now. She knew Ryan liked things like warm tea and soft music, things that Wednesday herself rarely indulged in, but she was willing to try. "Would you like me to get you some tea?" she offered. "Or maybe a heating pad?" Ryan's soft expression softened even more. She shook her head gently. I appreciate it, Wens, but honestly, just having you here helps." The simple words made Ryan's heart thump along with Wednesday's, a little harder in their chests. She wasn't exactly used to being needed, especially in this way. Ryan needed her. But something felt right about it. She couldn't never bring herself to say the words out loud, words like, "I care about you" or "I love you." But in her own way, she hoped that Ryan could feel it, like the way she looked after her even in the smallest of actions. For a few moments, the two of them just sat in silence. Ryan was curled up, eyes half lit from exhaustion. Wednesday, her usual sharp and analytic self, found herself simply existing beside her. Ryan's breathing began to slow, and for the first time in a few days, she seemed at peace. Wednesday had always admired the way Ryan's radiant warmth energy seemed to spread to anyone she was near, and she was suddenly aware of how distant her own world could feel sometimes. But Ryan made everything softer, more bearable. Maybe it was because of how opposite they were. Wednesday's dark and a bit angsty view of the world balanced by Ryan's gentle sunlit outlook. Ryan shifted, pulling the blanket down slightly. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, looking up at Wednesday. "I didn't mean to worry you." Wednesday tilted her head, her expression a mix of curiosity and tenderness. "You didn't. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." Ryan's lips parted before she thought she was about to say something, but she hesitated. Instead, she simply reached out, her small hand gently resting on Wednesday's. It was an action that startled Wednesday, though she didn't pull away. "Thank you," Ryan whispered, "for just being here, for caring." Wednesday didn't answer, not immediately. She just let the words hang in the air, allowing them to settle between them. She didn't have to explain herself to Ryan. Ryan just kinda understood. "I could try making you something more comfortable," Wednesday said, finally, as the idea of actually trying to make Ryan feel better was a new concept to her, but one she was willing to entertain. Ryan smiled up at her, the first real smile she'd shown in days, and Wednesday realized just how much she truly missed it. "That sounds nice, actually." Wednesday, without another word, stood up and left. Ryan sat there a little bit confused. She wasn't entirely sure how to go about her girlfriend just leaving, but she just waited. Wednesday grabbed a few things, some herbs she knew Ryan liked, and some hot water, and a clean mug. She prepared the tea and tried not to think too much about it. This wasn't a grand gesture, it was just a simple one, a small way for someone to know she cared. When she returned, Ryan had propped herself up against the pillows, her eyes a little brighter than before. "What did you make?" she asked softly, curious. "Tea," Wednesday said simply. She handed Ryan the mug, with the gentle steam rising from the liquid inside. Ryan took it carefully, wrapping both hands around the mug as if savoring the warmth. She closed her eyes briefly, taking a deep breath in. "This is perfect. Thank you," she murmured. Wednesday didn't respond. She didn't say anything. She simply sat down beside her again, her presence a silent comfort to Ryan, and for the first time in days, Ryan felt like everything might just be okay again. Wednesday stayed there, watching over her, even as the darkness of the evening closed around them, and for once she didn't feel like the weight of the world was pushing her down. As the evening drew on, the flickering of candlelight in the corner of Ryan's dorm cast soft shadows against the walls. Ryan sipped her tea, and Wednesday had made for her, feeling the warmth seep through her body, relaxing her sore muscles. She focused her eyes on Wednesday. She could see the way Wednesday was watching her, the soft gleam of concern still lingering in her usually impassive gaze. It was strange how much Wednesday's attention made her feel like she cared for her, and yet it never came with the flowery words that people had used to express affection. Instead, it was in small things, her presence, and the way she took action when it mattered, the moments of quiet understanding. "Wednesday?" Ryan began softly, breaking the silence, her voice tinged with sweetness that was as warm as the tea she drank. Wednesday responded, with eyes meeting Ryan's with that intense, focused look she always wore. "Why did you come here today?" Ryan asked, a hint of vulnerability in her tone. She had been wondering for a while, and now the question just seemed to spill out before she could stop it. Wednesday looked at her for a moment, as if carefully considering the question. Then, with a faint hint of a smile, almost barely there, but nonetheless, she answered, "I suppose I wanted to make sure you were all right. I may not be very good at these things, but I can't just leave you to suffer alone. That's no fun." Ryan's heart swelled. It was the closest Wednesday had ever admitted to how much she cared for her. And though it was a bit lackluster, it meant the world to her. "Thank you," Ryan whispered, her voice full of appreciation. She put down the mug on the nightstand and scooted closer to Wednesday, resting her head on her shoulder. "You're really special. You know that?" Wednesday froze for a split second at the unexpected gesture, but she quickly relaxed, her gaze softening as she tilted her head slightly up to glance at YN. "I'm not the one who's special here," she replied. Her voice held a quiet fondness. YN smiled, closing her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, she could see the faintest blush creeping up on Wednesday's pale cheeks. It was a rare sight, and one that YN cherished. "I know we're different," YN murmured, "but I think that's why I love being with you. You make me feel seen even when you don't really say much." Wednesday's cold heart fluttered slightly at her words. She wasn't used to being one to receive affection, especially not in such an open and vulnerable way. But with YN, it felt different. There was no pressure, no expectations. It was just simply the two of them sharing a moment of peace amidst the chaos outside the world. "I'm glad you feel that way," Wednesday said quietly, her words almost too soft to hear, but YN caught them all the same. "It's a good thing to feel wanted, I suppose." YN tilted her head, her face inches away from Wednesday's. The moment felt suspended in time. Before either of them could think about it, YN gently pressed a kiss to her cheek. Wednesday's breath hitched, her dark eyes widening slightly. YN pulled back, just enough to meet her gaze once more, smiling softly. And the smile that was all Wednesday needed to understand. It was a simple, tender moment. But to her, it was everything. Without a word, Wednesday pulled YN with her arm. It wrapped around her shoulders in a rare, intimate gesture. YN nestled closer. "Promise me something?" YN murmured, her voice soft and drowsy. Wednesday's voice was just as quiet, her fingers. "Promise me that you'll always be here, even when we're different. Promise me you'll always stay." Wednesday's chest tightened in a way she didn't expect. For someone who had never been afraid of losing anything, her heart gave a soft thump at the question. "I promise," she whispered, her voice steady. "I'll always stay." And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of their shared silence, both knew that despite their differences, they would always stay together.